So the first question that we have is, can the stereotypical competitive exams be matched to the student-oriented system of education? Should we totally get away from them if education is to be effective?
So I will tell you two answers to that question. And I think, like many things in the world is complex. And I wish it was as simple as a yes or no, or this way or that way. There's a reality of you may be held accountable to depending on what system you work in. There's a reality of university entrance. So I think that while philosophically, I believe that these various stereotypical competitive high stakes exams actually don't measure the type of learning we want for our kids in the future, they are the unfortunate realities of today. Which is why I think that first question of what is important to learn, what is important for our students to learn, understand, and be able to do is actually still very key. It allows us to mediate the reality of today with what is truly important for the future. And I believe the way we compromise is by prioritization. If we only prepare our students for these exams, they actually won't do as well on the exams as if we prepare our students for also creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, cosmopolitanism, all of these wonderful C's that we have, right? The 4 C's, 5 C's, however many C's. That first question in the series of 6 is important as a compromise question. But philosophically, yes, we should totally get away from these tests. The other reason why the compromise is important is if you do research in psychometric validation, the type of things that are easy to measure are low-end learning. However, those things that are easy to measure are still necessary for a university entrance. Our universities cannot look at individual students when they have 10,000, 5,000 university applicants. It's just a reality. I wish they could, they can't. And therefore standardized testing, unfortunately for the near future, is still necessary. Hence the need for that first question. Unfortunately for the next 5 to 10 years, I believe there's going to be compromises, which is why all 6 of those questions need to be asked all the time.
Thank you so much. I think that helps. The next question we have is, do you think that students should be able to choose 100% what they learn?
So I think that there's different philosophies. Now, I know really successful schools that try that philosophy. I believe that philosophy is not right for every learner. I believe that philosophy is not realistic in most of the situations you and I live in today. I think I mostly believe that that's true and correct for many students, but definitely not all. The model that I like is the landscape. So I don't believe that we should prescribe step-by-step everything kids do. I don't believe we should be, for example, on page 53 because it's Thursday. I believe that student interest should play a role in this. However, I believe that professional educators, people who write standards, write curriculum, who really know deeply about math and how math is learned, who know deeply about language arts, how language arts is learned, who know deeply about science and social studies. They put together curricular pieces based on their discipline expertise. I think teachers, we then take that, we ask the first question, and what we do is we create a landscape. We say, you know what, in this unit, professional educators have said that for you students, it is important to learn this geometry. It's important for you to learn about ancient civilizations and how they developed laws. It's important for you to learn how to write persuasively. So within that landscape, the frame that we create, because we know as professional educators what are important sets of knowledge, skills, and outcomes for students, we make room for student choice. We actually connect, and hence I use that word plug, right? Plug in that systems. How do we plug in what we deem as educators is important with student motivation? So within a geometry unit, how do we make that interesting to children? Have we asked them, how do you use geometry in real life? How would you want to use persuasive writing? Have we tried to say, persuade your peers, persuade your parents? Not just write it for the sake of a grade, but plugging it in. So I think the answer to that question, again, is pretty complex. I don't believe that it's practical to take that approach anytime soon, even though it may be tempting.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ciotti. I think that helps as well. Uh, we have some good comments that I would just like to read out for you. They are actually thanking you about the good perspectives that they've got in the session. They are saying that the strategy has clarified a lot to someone as a leader. It's a memorizing session. The other question that we have is, through your experience, can you please mention ways of increasing student engagement in online education in the pandemic condition?
That's, I think that's a question that I would love to engage with you all on via Twitter, Instagram, and email. I think I have probably similar questions that you have. I've spent most of my career thinking about that in a live format, and I like that best. However, over the past year, obviously, all of us have been thinking about this online, and luckily, I've been doing quite a bit of work in online education prior to that. I have a couple suggestions without taking up too much time and without and inviting your feedback there too via email and Twitter and all these things. My suggestion is that those ideas of voice and choice, that idea of collaboration, and these 6 questions, I think work really well. What I've seen work well is any content that needs to be delivered. This online format has heightened the importance of chunking. And by chunking, I mean paying attention to a student's, anybody's, what is it called? Attention span. We know that a kid's attention span is about 5 minutes plus 1 year of their life after age 5. So up to age 5, kids can pay attention for about 5 minutes. A 6-year-old, 6 minutes. An 18-year-old, about 18 to 20 minutes. And adults, we never get past 20 minutes. So I'm pushing your attention span right now. And we know that we should be able to deliver content in 20 minutes or less chunks. So if I create a flipped classroom video, I give you, here's something we're going to do synchronously and live, and I'm going to deliver content for you. It must be 20 minutes or less. What do we do with the rest of the time? I would say there's some really neat tools around small group work, around collaborating online. Some of these online tools, like Zoom has some good breakout rooms. Project-based learning is very much possible online. I guess if I were to give you a short answer, chunking content delivery in 20-minute chunks or less, and then asking students to work collaboratively, and then mixing that with individual go and work asynchronously on your own, and then come back and let's also workshop it collaboratively, and making sure we're chunking everything in these 20-minute chunks of time, no more than that, even the collaborative work.
Excuse me.
Great.
Can I?
Yes, please go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Ciotti. Good evening.
Good evening.
This is Dr. E. Prasad Rao, Chairman, Paramita Group of Schools near Hyderabad. So it's very insightful indeed, But just I would like to know, the pedagogical relevances, if they are, culture context, the culture in which the child is growing, or is growing, maybe family culture, community culture. If the pedagogical relevance, learning will be like a flair for the kid, like a flair, because it's his own culture context that the pedagogy finds its roots in.
I completely agree with this idea of learning as a flare, right? We light the fire, and the fire needs to burn on with the kid, or in the culture, or at home, right? So that idea of how do kids learn best and what's most important for kids to learn has to be answered in a cultural context, right? I think that, for example, I know in certain cultural contexts in India, where many of you are, there is still this very much community relevance for factual learning and learning skills that may have eroded in certain, unfortunately for me as an American, in certain American contexts, right? And so very much those two questions of what's important to learn and understand and how do kids learn best, I believe those two questions demand a cultural lens. demand looking at parental expectations, cultural expectations, national expectations, and the kids' expectations themselves, and norms and traditions. And very much I agree with what you're saying, as well as this. I love this idea of the flare. It's brilliant as a metaphor and a visual. Thank you.
One last question. How about these traditional knowledge systems? Because the kids are rooted, the adults are rooted in our own traditional knowledge systems. Do you think that we can take a recourse to some of those things in the modern style of learning?
So in Hawaii, where I'm from, there is a huge movement to reconnect with traditional knowledge systems. And we actually use exactly that term in Hawaii. We look at tapping into indigenous knowledge, indigenous wisdoms, indigenous ways of thinking, and indigenous epistemologies, right? So I coming from also coming from a non-Western culture myself, I am Native Hawaiian. My mother is Native Hawaiian, Japanese, and Scottish. And my father is Italian, but born in New York. My wife is Senegalese from Senegal in West Africa. And so my kids are very mixed. And my children and I talk about different ways of thinking about the world from each of these different heritages. And I very much agree with you that it is important to do this. How do we do this? I believe is a whole different masterclass, but very much ties into this, right? Traditional knowledge systems I have seen, because these curriculums that I've written have been successful in two different ways. One is tapping into students who all are still connected to the traditional knowledge systems, students who are still living in a worlds that are still rooted in tradition. In Hawaii, our Hawaiian students, those roots were cut through a process of colonialism. In Hawaii, it was illegal to speak the Hawaiian language. It was illegal to practice Hawaiian religion. It was illegal to dance a Hawaiian dance. Colonialism in Hawaii cut those roots. So another way that we look at traditional knowledge systems is actually repairing historical trauma and taking kids whose roots were cut and transplanting them in a metaphorical soil, rich in nutrients, rich in traditional knowledge, traditional epistemology nutrients. And for those kids, it's about reconnecting. And reconnecting is a very different way of learning than using roots that are already there. So I guess in a different session, and if you want to connect over email or Twitter, I would love to do that and say this traditional knowledge epistemology conversation is one that's near and dear to my heart, one that I'd love to continue.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
We have a lot of comments. Thank you so much, Mr. Prasad Rao. But I think we are running out of time. So we have some more questions that are there on the chat. So I would just like to call that out, which is, what role do parent and teachers play in increasing student engagement in learning? Mm-hmm. So that's the question that we have.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's the question that we have, Mr. Kapono, and I think that's something that we can take up right now with the time that we have in hand. If anybody has any other questions, I think they could reach out.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Mr. Kapono, something has been nagging me since I've heard the story about that little girl you have narrated.
Yes.
My question is, why could she not confide in her teacher her problem? Did she feel alienated in the class? What was missing? Why was the connection missing? Something that's nagging me. Could you please?
I completely agree with you on this. I think that as an educator, I was lucky because I actually didn't go to teacher college in the United States. There was something significantly missing in teacher university in the United States. There was a huge period of time in the United States of about 20 years, 25 years that pushed rigor and relevance. And I like relevance a lot, and I don't mind rigor, right? These are all really important things, but pushed them in ways that trumped, that overarched, that made us forget about the other R relationships. And I believe that, this was a deficit that my friend and I, when luckily I missed teacher college, and so I still very much believed in relevance, in relationships. I believe my friend very much believed in relationships as well. But the system we were working in was one that pushed rigor and relevance over all of this, and specifically rigor. We were still learning relevance, right? Rigor, cover the curriculum, be rigorous, be high challenge. These kids need to excel. We're the United States of America. And by the way, the new way of doing things is make it relevant, connect it to kids. And only recently has the conversation returned to things that we knew 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, which is the relationships between kids is really important. You may never have forgotten that, but I will say that this was a huge deficit in American teacher education, teacher programming, and public schooling for several decades, specifically in that era that we called No Child Left Behind. And yes, this is probably the thing that my friend and I lamented the most. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Kapono. Thank you, ma'am. So the last question that we have, Mr. Kapono, for you today is, there's a question which they want to understand. What is the role of a parent and a teacher, or what do both of them play a role in the education of a student or of a child?
Right. So I think that the role of parents in the 6 questions I shared has a lot to do with understanding what's important to learn, understand, and be able to do. Parents are not professional educators. And so they should not be the ones coming up with standards, writing units, but they can inform what they hope for their kids. Right? If a parent hopes for their kids to become a doctor and you work at a private school, their hopes are quite relevant for their kids. Right? If a parent's hope for their kids drives how they support their kids at home, maybe we hope something different for kids than the parents hope, in which case our communication with parents is very, very important. Parents, I think we all wish parents were either more involved or less involved. It's very rare that we have parents who are just right involved, right? Either they're overbearing, they're always involved, they do their kids' homework for them, they're in your classroom too often, they're emailing too much, babying their kids, not letting their kids grow up, or they're too disinvolved. Please support your kids at home. Read to them. Read the emails we're sending home. Support them. Sit down. Do homework with them. It's very rare that it's in between there. And that's just a function of how life works. I unfortunately, as an educator, I'm tired of thinking about school by the time I go home. So my 10-year-old and my 6-year-old lose out because I'm just exhausted by the time I get home. I believe parent involvement is key. One of the things that we've started here is a position of a parent engagement coordinator, because somebody thinking through positive parent engagement, proactive positive parent engagement, parent education is really important. And I will say, if any of you are familiar with Fountainhead School in Surat, in the Gujarat state, they actually do a really good job of parent engagement, parent onboarding, aligning parent expectations with the school's expectations. And I think they have a few really nice models for that.